an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Ghostwater, Cradle Book 5, chapters 7, 8, and 9. In these chapters, we don't see Yaren at all. Pure Lindon action. I'm here for it. He goes up against this dragon bitch and takes her down. It's very satisfying. At the same time, now he has made another very powerful enemy. Did you really have to make another very powerful enemy, Lindon? Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Andy for commissioning this episode. So this section, I really was super afraid, I will be honest, that we were going to bounce back to Yaren's POV before we got the end of the story between Lindon and Ekeri is how the audiobook narrator says her name. So I'm just going to go with that because that seems to be sort of automatically how I say it anyway. I like Ekeri better in its tone and sound, but it's just not, it doesn't come out naturally. So I really thought that we were going to get like a lot more of him training, bounce back to Yaren, come back to him because reminder, it's a couple of weeks, I think, that he is in this place without any contact with Yaren. She doesn't know how he's doing. So I thought that maybe the author would feel that that was enough time that he really should check in with Yaren in the midst of that. And as much as I would have understood that impulse, I didn't want that. I really wanted to stick with Lindon and see where this wound up going. And I'm super happy that we get the end of this. It's not the end, obviously, because as I say, he's got enemies now, new ones. But we get at least the first, I think, major outright battle victory that Lindon has had. Lindon has been able to really pull through with shit before. And when I say battle victory, I mean against other people. Although people's sort of a loose word for her, but I guess that still applies. Because he's gone up against people before, but he's tended to win through some kind of trickery. He will do something to have sort of prepared himself. When he does go up against Jailong, he doesn't win. He loses an arm and Jailong just takes pity on him. And other than that, I don't feel like we've really seen... That feels like that's really the only major confrontation that Lindon's had, actually. Because otherwise he's just been sort of defensive a lot of the time. Pardon me, I'm going to move my mic stand a little bit here. And trying not to get into fights with people. Or he's going up against magical creatures, sacred beasts, etc. And because of who this woman is, I'm really curious what the reaction is going to be from everyone else about him killing her. Because it's really, her family, her sister, who we see at the very end of the last chapter of chapter 9, obviously loves her. There's clear affection there. It's a really interesting concept, too, that these are dragons that as they ascend and grow more powerful, become less and less dragonish and more like people. And that's something that they aspire to. Their sense of aesthetic is very admiring of the look of humans, and they seem to find it very practical. And I was sort of asking myself when we were learning about the Black Flame Empire and learning about how dragons used to just run everything. My main question was, what did that look like for dragons to just be walking around running shit? And I don't know, this isn't obviously this community of dragon, I feel like we hear their name. Is it like Golden Path, or I don't know, Andy, if you're in the chat, but if you want to remind me, feel free, because I don't feel like that's a spoiler. I feel like they and their choice to like try and look more like humans, that's not necessarily something that all dragons do, right? She's thinking about how there are others that don't want to look more like humans. They're very proud of looking like dragons and they want to keep that look. And, you know, that's something that they actively like. It's an interesting concept to me because I'm somebody who tends to feel like I see a sort of parallel there in some ways with like people of color who feel pressured to look white, you know, and wanting to be wanting to quote refine their look by lightening their skin or straightening their hair or getting nose jobs to get, you know, narrower noses, or eye jobs to make their eyes more open and round. And my instinct is to be like, yeah, you should be proud of being a dragon. Just be a dragon, girl. Be proud of being a dragon. That's rad. Just do that. What are you doing? But honestly, I don't know enough about functioning in the world as a sacred artist in a dragon's body. And, you know, she talks about specifically the aesthetic being something like that is important to them. So it's not purely practical. They do like the look better. But I am super interested in practically exactly what advantages she gets, because I could see that being enough. Anyway, I just find that really interesting, you know, finding out that, because I just sort of thought that I didn't really like come up with a fixed theory exactly, but I thought that Ekeri, it was going to turn out that her deal was that she had gone in like a slightly different direction than, oh my God, I keep wanting to say Thanos, Orthos. And Orthos, you know, he is the descendant of dragons, but he's a turtle. So there's been obviously some like evolutionary changes or interbreeding changes. I don't know. And I thought maybe something similar had happened with her. But, you know, finding out that she was just a legit dragon when she was born out of an egg, I think. Because I think he says she would have eaten this meat from a hatchling, I think is what he says. That is really fascinating to me. And also, that means that there are just straight dragons still in this world, when I had thought everybody had said that there weren't any. And now I'm realizing, oh, maybe it's just that there are no black flame dragons left. Like, I may have thought black flame dragons were the only dragons, and it appears I am mistaken. So, anyway, I'm getting distracted by this because I find it really fascinating. I am sure we'll find out more information about this whole clan and their deal. But for now, let's begin at the start of Chapter 7. So, we begin with Dross getting his operation, is what it's called here. The procedure, you know, where he is being moved out of his physical construct body and being placed into the sapphire. And it's really great because, like, Lindon's super worried about it. He's aware of the fact that this isn't really how he should be handling this. And it's not just, oh, I don't have the right equipment, I haven't got the training. That's certainly part of it. But mostly what it is that he shouldn't be trying to combine two spiritual constructs that have distinctive purposes that are not compatible necessarily. What he should do is pull the binding, I think, out of one. I'm going to go back and actually read exactly how this says. the sapphire already had a construct in it, so he was trying to meld 2 constructs and fix them both to the gem. Fisher Gesha would tell him to extract both Dross and the Eye of the Deep construct, then break them down piece by piece until he could rebuild them into one construct with the functions of both. Then he could bind that single construct to the gem, preferably, or another suitable vessel, without a hole in it. Then she would have hit him for trying to do this without guidance. And he's just like, first of all, don't have the training. Second of all, don't have the time. Third of all, don't have the equipment. Fourth of all, I don't know enough about Dross to feel comfortable pulling him out and deconstructing him. I don't know that would, like, you know, Dross is obviously a special construct. He has some kind of awareness now because of his time in that well. So I kind of agree with Lindon on this, that, like, this is uncharted territory, and I'm not sure you could treat him like another construct and it would work out the same way. You might lose that about him if you try to do it. So Lindon just goes ahead and just tries to stick Dross in there and use his Madra to fuse them together. And I love that as he's doing it, like, first he tells Dross, I need to remove you from your vessel. And he has these, like, gold tongs ready to do it with. And Dross just pops out and is like, oh, that's done. Okay, now what? And I love that so much. Like, he's just trying to help. He's like, okay, yeah, I got that. What do you need now? I kind of thought that maybe Dross could just zip into the thing on his own. But no, Lindon winds up having to use his remnant hand to hold on to the purple, like, whirling sort of construct of Dross and then move him into the gem. And I love this. He gets grabbed, Dross gets grabbed by the hand, and Lindon's like, that gave me a tinkle. Is everything all right? And Lindon has to focus deeply to keep his remnant hand from just eating Dross, because that's its, like, instinct, right? And as he's, like, pulling Dross into it, the construct starts to be like, you know, I'm starting to realize maybe this isn't, like, the best idea. I mean, was I me before I could think freely? If you merge me with this, I don't know what I'll be anymore. What if I'm not the same person? Will I see myself differently? Will I be able to think anymore? Or will I be what I was? Will I be myself? What if I, like, hate this and it's too late and it's done? And then says, on second thought, I'm not sure and then all of a sudden it's over. And it seems for a second like, ooh, what's going on? Because there's, like, a little bit of light rippling, but nothing happens quite yet. And then motion and light again. And you hear Dross saying, want to do this? It's too risky, isn't it? Who would gamble their very self on a game of chance? And Lindon has to be like, buddy, it's already done. And Dross is like, a word? And he flies up out of the crack and is just sitting there as this new construct that is more defined than it had been before. And there had used to be, he had been, like, very purple before, but there's something more like violet about him now. And there had only been sort of lines passing through his form, but now it looks much more like gears and, like, more complex. And he says, I feel good. I feel great, actually. It's like I've had one eye closed all my life, and now I've opened the other 5. I love that. The other 5, like, just, well, you know, 6 eyes, whatever. You've got quite a complicated soul, don't you? 2 cores. I feel like that's an unusual number. And I can see your face so much more clearly now. It's, well, at least you have a wonderful spirit. Yes, indeed. That spirit of yours, wow. Oh my God. Dross. I love this so much. So Lindon's like, okay, can you tell us about another way out of here? Long story short, no. He's like, there's another portal, but it's in North Strider's personal quarters. We could, I believe that I could open the door into his quarters, but getting there is going to be the real issue. And so they'd have to leave this bubble, but this bitch is sitting right outside. Now, I don't know why I thought that since he had a key to the spirit door, like, I'm not even sure what you call it, because the door appears and disappears completely, right? When he goes through it. It's like there's a tower of stone with a hole in it, but the door itself isn't really like, you don't see the defined edges of it. There's nothing, for example, you couldn't jam a crowbar into it and just try and like pry it open, right? It just sort of fuses and vanishes. And when you open it, it's not like the door physically opens, it's just an opening appears. So I saw this as like access to the core tunnels of this whole place. And I assumed that since he had a key to get in here, that meant that he was now inside proper and he would be able to follow the tunnels to all of the other bubbles. That they would all be connected magically. And that if you wanted to access each bubble separately, you would have to go from one to the other physically. But that you could, if you, well, like once you were in with one of these keys, you could get to any of them from within. Now, I'm not saying that makes any sense. It doesn't really, because why would you have them be in separate bubbles? If one key can get you into all of them, that doesn't make sense. Although this key might be able to open the others. I don't know. Whatever it is, I just was wrong about it. So he has to leave here to physically get to the other place in order to leave this pocket world. So that puts him in the position of now having to deal with this dragon bitch. And Dross leaves, gets a bead on her, comes back, is like, oh yeah, she's definitely still out there. Ekeri Toth of the Gold Dragon, she goes by Ekeri. I guess they're just called the Gold Dragons. She goes by Ekeri, which is good because that's far easier to say. She's waiting for her, just outside for her prey to surface. That's you, by the way. You're the prey. Thank you, Dross. So when Lindon says, how did you know that? He says, this whole place is a network of constructs, just lousy with them. I popped in, sampled their memories of the last few hours, then popped out. Turns out there's all kinds of records in there. The same factions have been coming back every 10 years for over 50 years now, so we've piled up quite the hoard of juicy gossip. And he asks about specific information about her. So this is really interesting. She's close enough to Underlord that she can take on a humanoid form, can't she? By the time she reaches Archlord, she'll look even more human than you do, which... And there's every reason to suspect she will. She's the heir to the richest family on the continent, and they didn't get that way by not stealing everything that isn't nailed down, if you understand me. She practices the path of the flowing flame, which involves dragon fire behaving like liquid. I imagine that's what she sprayed onto the door for about an hour after you vanished. Didn't do any good, of course. Those are high-quality rocks. And I love this so much. But he says, so the only way out is through her. And Orthos is like, yeah, that sounds the fucking, like, the way I like best. Let's fucking do this. Orthos is not here to play, kids. Orthos is here to throw down with the bitch or teach somebody else to throw down with the bitch. That's it. And they're drinking this water because, reminder, that smart water, which is what I'm going to call it now, branding aside, don't come out with the copyright infringement, smart water. What that's doing is actually helping him with the clarity of his mind. So he's in a pretty good place, but they do need food. And that smart water is the only water in this entire place. So they're kind of subsisting on just that, which means they can't sleep. And it doesn't even seem like they mind. It doesn't seem like not sleeping has any ill effects as of right now. I can't help but wonder, though, how long that's even going to last, because, like, he gets out of here at the end of this section. We don't see him leave, but we see that Ekeri's been taken care of, right? Now, I am hoping that he gets to another bubble before his Ekeri's sister comes after him. I don't know how that would work. But the fact that they were there, I think, about 2 weeks, I think is what the author says at one point. I don't want to believe that this water will allow you to stay awake without ever sleeping permanently, and it would be okay. I feel like that's too... And granted, I understand that there's a limited supply of it, so even if it did have that effect, it couldn't really be used that way. It wouldn't last, right? The level of that water has dropped significantly by the time they leave. Nevertheless, I keep remembering Fisher Gesha's advice to him and how she basically was like, dude, what are you doing? You need to learn to take a fucking break. You need to learn to not constantly be like courting death and live a life. And while I know that he has a very specific goal that keeps him from being able to do that, that really what she's saying he shouldn't do is kind of necessary considering his goals, I still think that there will come a point in which rest is absolutely impossible to avoid. And I hope that this like smart water has its limitations, because I think that kind of balance is really important, and I like that Fisher Gesha brought it up, and I would like for it to be acknowledged in a way that feels less like perfunctory and more, oh my God, you were right, and now I do have to rest. You know what I mean? Anyway, so we go into her POV, and it's her talking about all the things that she tried to do to like burn her way through the door. I love the way that this is written. She had vented her considerable irritation on nearby vegetation. Now the sea stalks around the shelter had been burned away, leaving nothing but sand. There was nothing blocking her view of the entrance. For the first hour, she watched with perfect patience. And she is constantly sort of thinking about how measured she's being about certain things. And the rock wasn't even scorched after her perfectly calm and controlled assault. Like, clearly she threw a tantrum. But she doesn't want to admit that she threw a tantrum because that indicates a lack of control. And this sort of comes up a little bit later when she yells at them. She says something with them with a voice that has more dragon in it than human. And she really feels a way about the fact that she displayed this sort of bestial aspect in this moment. I just really like this idea that like her goal is to get away, as far away from being a dragon at all. And even when it comes into her voice and things like that, the fact that she feels ashamed of it, I think is really interesting. So Lindon, we go back to him. At first, it had gone so well. So, basically what's happened is that Lindon has to learn to veil his spirit because he is going to have to go out and hunt for food. And she has that kind of, perception that would lead her, she wouldn't have to see him in order to know that he was out hunting. She would sense him. So he has to learn how to veil his spirit in order to be able to leave the enclosure and, get some food and get back. And he practices a long time. it seems like he is going, it's like something that he has mostly managed to master, at least to the level that he would need just to accomplish this task. And as he's heading out there, it's like he finds a fish. The fish screams when he attacks it, but apparently the fish scream all the time, which is honestly extremely unnerving and unsettling to think about, but there it is. And so just a fish screaming won't get her attention necessarily, because they do that. But he can veil his pure Madra core, but he can't veil the black flame. That's one that's just really difficult to veil in the best of times. The path is just hard to, as a fellow dragon, Ekeri would be able to discover black flame anywhere within this habitat, which was what Dross called the pockets of air within the giant bubbles. Which meant Lindon had to catch one of these high gold level fish, kill it, and bring it back without using black flame. So, long story short, he does not succeed in doing this without black flame. And when he does finally, it's honestly a badass enough moment that I can't even be that mad at him, even though I know that this is part of like what kind of begins to set shit off. So he triggers the binding in his arm as he's attacking the fish. This is his initial plan. And it begins to drink down the Madra from the creature. When Lindon had gotten the arm, he'd hoped that the hunger binding would allow him to steal Madra from other sacred artists. That, he reasoned, would help him learn more paths. But other than the obvious practical downsides to such a plan, he'd since learned that the hunger binding was not as simple to use as the Ancestor's Spear had been. Maybe there would be a day when he could use the arm to pull Madra into his core. Until then, he had at least learned one trick. When the arm had absorbed so much water Madra from the fish that it started to tint blue-green, Lindon vented the excess power. Aquatic Madra sprayed from his forearm, splattering like rain on the sand before it dissolved into essence. The arm could swallow some Madra of any aspect to strengthen itself, but anything more than that amount would start changing the aspects of the limb's Madra. Unless Lindon wanted the limb of a water remnant, he had to vent the extra Madra before it corrupted the arm too much. So, without its Madra, the fish had lost the will to resist. It flopped once or twice more as Lindon drove his fist into its skull until he heard something crack. So, this seems like it's alright. It's dead. It appears that he has succeeded. And then a remnant begins to rise, which I just don't know why. I constantly forget about these fucking remnants, guys. They keep being a surprise to me. I should know this by now. And yet, he kept an eye behind him, hoping to lose it. The remnants didn't seem as dangerous as their living forms. When he turned back to the front, he was face to face with a wall of fangs. So, all these other fish apparently arrived when this one screamed. And they are, well, not all these. It appears that it's just this one, but it's the first one to arrive. There's like a sort of assumption that there's going to be others. And at this point, to defend himself, he just instinctively goes to the black flame. He leaps at the remnant fish and uses his Madra or his remnant arm to grab it. He tore away a chunk of Madra. The remnant scream sounded like a crashing wave. A cloak-powered fist punched through its head like a spear. Then he turned to catch the living fish that was darting at him. He caught a lower fang in one hand and an upper fang in the other. So at this point, he's starting to be like, oh my god, this is really bad. And then he remembers what Orthos said. A dragon could not be defeated by a fish. He was the predator here. He had the power. In a massive rush of strength, he tore the fish apart. He stood with its body in his left hand and its lower jaw in his right, panting, blood coating the sand. As the black flame core winked out, he threw his head back and let out a shout of victory. Then he switched back to his pure core and instantly broke into a cold sweat. What had he been thinking? See? Dross said from his outer robe. You're not being stealthy at all. What you're doing there is being loud. You see? You see the difference? Oh my god. So, Ekeri turns up, and she's like, give me that fucking key. The stone, right? He tries to resist. He should have just given it to her. He should have trusted that Dross would know what was up, but he didn't. He tells her, forgiveness, but I have to get past you, which honestly... And she says, you've got a mouth on you, Logold. And then, what does she do? She wraps her tail around him and punches him in his ribs so that his tail prevents him from flying off. It holds him in place so that she can really beat on his ass, which is honestly so badass to me. Like, the moment that he realizes what's happened, because he's like, my back wasn't against anything. Why do I feel like I'm not moving away? And he realizes it's her tail. I just like cackled a little bit. So she reaches into his pocket, takes the thing, and she's like looking at the stone, realizing something's wrong with it. She says, what is this? It's dead. Is this a fake? And he's like really fucked up, but he still like grabs it back from her, and she doesn't say anything or stop him, which is like the one thing I didn't totally believe, because she's such a greedy person that I really think even if it wasn't what she was looking for, I just am loath to believe she would let anything go. But I'm willing to excuse it because he needs it. It's fine. So, she is about to finish him off. And who should appear but Orthos, who manages to swoop in, distract her, fire some dragon's breath at her, and grabs Lindon by the robe and gets down through the opening using Dross in his like spirit form, who turns himself into the stone because he's got that same function even if he's not in the stone, and so opens the door. And thus they escape. It's bonkers to me that Orthos manages to be faster than this chick. But there it is. So, Ekeri is watching this. We go back to her POV. And she's trying to figure out what the fuck happened with that gem. There had been a construct in that gem yesterday. Today it had escaped its vessel and opened the door independently, meaning it could operate on instructions and had a measure of control over Ghostwater. Even more interesting, they had evidently known she was here. The Logold had come out wrapped in a veil and hadn't retreated at the sight of her shelter or shown any surprise at her attack. Was the construct spying on her? Or could they send their spiritual perception out from the tunnels even though she couldn't send hers in? I really like this, her just trying to figure out how this could have happened. And eventually she reasons they wouldn't have come out this way to get food if they had any choice. Which means that if she just continues to camp out here, they are going to try and come out again. So, we go back to Lindon, and he's continuing to drink from this well. Reminder that Little Blue, who normally is the one to sort of heal him up after he has used Black Flame, is not up to it. She is withering away. Like, not really, she's not like in danger of dying or anything, but she just doesn't have it in her to do what either he or Orthos needs. So he is having to cycle as much as he possibly can. The Spirit Well, therefore, is like really helpful to them right now because he's not actually, or not the Spirit Well. The Spirit Well is a different thing. The Smart Water. But I'll talk about the Spirit Well now anyway, because Dross just brings it up here. I'm sure you're looking for a way to restore your spirit. I have the perfect solution. There is a Spirit Well. Oh, it's beautiful. It promotes growth in the soul, stimulating recovery and increasing Madra density. That was another reward for the workers. A glass or two could take a high gold to the brink of advancement. Quite a coveted bonus, I can tell you. Now, reminder, a high gold to the brink of advancement. And we've been told repeatedly that it gets exponentially harder to raise from one level to the next. So that's massive. Like, huge. And he asks where it is, Lindon does, and he says in the tablet library. They thought they could condense a type of mental madra that when focused on the brain increased performance. And Lindon says, did it not work? And he says in small doses, yes, but in less small doses, it drove all test subjects violently insane. It's roughly 500 yards in that direction, right through Ekeri. So Lindon decides that it's time to have some dinner. He can't cook this fish, apparently. Or maybe he just doesn't have time, because he does light a fire a little bit later. So I guess he could, but he's just not interested right now. So he gets a chunk of the meat, he eats it, and he's like, whoa, this is strong. It's just so much more than he expected. The meat was tender, melting like butter on his tongue, and he swallowed it without having to chew. He gasped with relief after swallowing, reaching for a flask of Dreamwell water to wash it down. And I love this. He's like, that was a lot. And Orthos is like, was it bad? And he was like, no, not exactly. And then with an inward sigh, his right arm flopped to the ground instead of grabbing the nearest water phial. With an inward sigh, he reached out with his left arm. When that didn't follow his directions either, he knew something was wrong. Orthos, he mumbled, there's something. So, Orthos is yelling at him to cycle it, take control. When Lindon's like, yo, this isn't in my Madra channels though. This is in my bloodstream. This does not feel like Madra. This feels like poison. But he does what Orthos tells him. And he realizes that his body isn't reacting the way that it has to poison. Normally it would pull from his Madra to help heal him. And that's not what's happening here. It says instead it was feeding on the power from the sacred beast's meat. Now he focused on the cycling process eagerly. Some time later he lay on his back, staring up at the blue lights of the ceiling, breathing slow and even. His blood-forged iron body had seized on the last of the fish's energy, dispersing it through his limbs. Even his remnant arm fed on it with relish. Much of the pain had vanished. Not only that, but his arms and legs felt tense and somehow lighter than usual. And Orthos takes a bite of it and is like, oh, fuck yes. Oh, that is so good. I haven't had something like this in a minute. Even the Aurelius family couldn't afford meat like this. This is insane. And at this point, Dross helpfully tells them, they're called silverfang carp, and they are not meant to be eaten by humans. They were raised here like cattle to feed some of the larger specimens of Ghostwater. Their meat promotes physical vitality and muscle growth. So it's not as though it's unhealthy. The opposite, really. So you see, good for you, and you survived, so no harm done. And Orthos is talking about how, like, this is something that underlords eat. The earlier you start eating like this, the better it is for you. If you did nothing but gorge yourself on those carp for the next month or two, you'd have the strength of a lion and endurance of an ox. And this is when Lindon asks about Ekeri. And he says, gold dragons eat meat of this quality from the moment they hatch. Yeah, he does use the word hatch, okay. By now she will have reached her limit. Her body can be improved no further. Which, that is a hell of a thing that he manages to kill her with Black Flame, despite the fact that her body is basically at peak. Like, that's serious. That's just goes to show what Black Flame can do if you manage to pull her other defenses down, which he did with the empty palm. So, he lights a fire here and begins to cycle fire Madra. And I really think it's interesting here that Orthos says something about how to use the basic cycling instead of the purification wheel. And Dross expresses some interest in what that is. And Lindon doesn't tell him because, Ethan had said that he kind of should keep it to himself because people would really want to know. And he says something like people might actually kill him in order to draw the technique out of his remnant. So it's serious. Like, whatever it is about this that does what it does is something that would be coveted. So he doesn't even tell Dross about it, which I personally think he can trust Dross. And he even seems to think he probably can too. But just, because one never knows, I think that was probably a smart move on his part. Better to be overcautious. And that's all I feel about the thing. So this is when, as he's beginning to train, because that's literally the only thing to be done in the situation that he's in right now. He is trapped. There is an enemy that he absolutely will have to face in order to get out. He is in a place where there is no food and has only water that the only water he can drink keeps him awake perpetually. Training is pretty much the only thing that's going to do any good right now. So they're talking about what he can do to move forward. And Orthos has him think about Ekeri's the path that she follows. Flowing flame. And Lindon realizes that what it is, because it's like a sort of a water path in its way, despite it being dealing with heat, it's extremely flexible. And because of that, she's always looking for openings, which in itself is kind of like a predictability. Let's see. So 2 days of constant sleepless training later, Lindon left the cave again. Thanks to the water, Lindon felt as though it had been much longer. He was able to train for twice as long as before. What training he had was twice as effective because he was always ready to give it his full concentration. So we hear that the level of water in the well has gone down. He sneaks out under a veil, kills a carp, brings it back, and eats it, and there's no incident. He doesn't get caught or noticed here. So, wait, no. Is that right? He doesn't get caught or noticed, though, does he? Oh, no, that's right. It seems like he doesn't. And he even gets the door open before Ekeri shows herself. I totally forgot. I thought that there was one where there was no incident and she doesn't notice. I should have known better. So this, he escapes again. And this is a real moment here. His remnant arm seized on her wrist. His strength couldn't compare to hers, but he had gravity on his side. With all his strength, he hauled her down. She twisted in his grip, slamming into the ground, braced on her feet and tail. Lindon had already triggered his arm. Intense heat flowed into his limb along with a flow of orange madra, sending spiritual pain shuddering through him. He gritted his teeth and continued even as he pulled back, trying to break his grip. She snarled, turning, whipping her tail at him. Without missing a beat, he vented the madra in his arm. Her own molten madra sprayed at her from only a few feet away, causing her to raise one gold hand to protect her face. Seizing Dross again, Lindon dove through the gap and slammed the door shut. So she's mad. And she's low-key, like she hears the fish screaming and she's kind of like, I wish they would try and start something. I wish they would come at me and try and start some shit. Which, honestly, I have been that kind of angry before. I lived in a not great neighborhood in Philadelphia, right around the time that I had one of the worst, most frustrating jobs I've ever had. And there were several days coming home from work. A lot of people expressed like concern about me walking home from the train station in the evening because of the neighborhood. And I was just like, honestly, I wish somebody would ever start something with me. If they didn't have a gun, that would be the time that I feel like I would be fine. If they have a gun, then all bets are off and I couldn't do shit. But there were a couple times where I was just like, I straight up want somebody to try and pick a fight with me right now because I would wreck them. And I know that sounds like I'm talking out of my ass, but I can be very strong, you guys. And so I really got her in this moment. I remembered that. And she calls back her attendants and is basically like, all right, these fuckers have done it. I tried to make a deal. I tried to just take the thing. The next time that this door opens, we are going to murder every single last fucking one of them. So when we go back to Lindon's POV, Orthos is like, I hope you're ready. And he says, yeah, I know. Next time she's definitely not letting me walk away. And Orthos says, no, next time you won't let her walk away. And I was like, Orthos, I love you so much. I love him here. And I love him later when Dross tries to be like, so what do you think his chances are really? And Orthos is like 100%. Did I fucking stutter? He's gonna kill her. Shut up. It's not even a question. And I just love him so much. Dross is saying like, oh, false confidence, false courage. But Orthos seems to genuinely 100% believe. It's not false. This is him like being like, you just don't know what you're talking about. I am the one with this kind of experience and I can see it's happening. Granted, he doesn't win using the technique that they had practiced, that he had been intended to win using. But nevertheless, it was a win. So I think that's all that matters. So let's see. Orthos was seeing the benefits of this water. He moved more easily than Lindon had ever seen him. Even the fissure in his shell had started to close. Not just the water. The fish meat as well. Mentally, he reported feeling clearer than he had in years, so his mood was bright, relatively speaking. However, his soul was still damaged and weak. He couldn't use a single technique without treatment, which Little Blue was in no shape to give him. Lindon's pure core recovered at a snail's pace without help. So this is when Orthos is like, all right, you learned 3 techniques at the Black Flame trials, but you've only been using 2. And all Black Flame artists mastered those 3, and many of them, most of them, developed 4 because they were able to create other techniques by learning more and figuring it out. That's how you make a path. You have to not neglect the one of those that isn't as easy. And Lindon says, Lindon assumes that he's talking about the twin stars and the empty palm and that whole thing. And Orthos is like, no. We're talking about the Void Dragon's dance. Orthos had argued that Lindon needed to master the dance, but because their practice grounds had been both small and devoid of much fire aura, and because Athan insisted that the duel with Jai Long would occur in a place with very little fire aura, they had abandoned the idea. As a result, Lindon had never used it in a real battle. And rarely in practice, in his opinion, the technique seemed too large and rarely in practice, in his opinion, the technique seemed too large and unwieldy to use in an actual fight. It seemed like the sort of thing you'd want if you were burning down a forest or attacking a village, which we see later, and he's not wrong. So they are working on getting him to form the dragon's breath because he takes a long time to do it. They had made great progress on that before Jai Long too, but they never reached a point that satisfied Lindon. So he continues working on this. They use like piles of trash and detritus that had been left around because there's tons of that to light up. And He says all his sleep was replaced by the dream well, cycling aura, processing fish meat, practicing dragon's breath, learning the void dragon's dance, swallowed every day and night. He lasted 2 weeks. That was as much time as they could afford. By the end of it, Little Blue was listless, thin, and pale. Even Dross, who assured him that Ghostwater was intact enough to last a few more months, had retreated into his gem to try and minimize Madra loss, which I keep forgetting that there's still a crack. I kind of thought that the fusing would heal that crack and make it so that it wasn't broken anymore, but apparently not. Though Lindon still rinsed out his Madra channels with pure Madra while training, the damage from the path of Black Flame was adding up. His channels were scarred, and his blood-forged iron body was taking longer and longer to heal him after he channeled Black Flame for too long. So, it's time. He asks Dross how often low golds have defeated true golds, to which Dross is basically like, don't worry about it, buddy. And then follows up with, it pretty much never happens. So just don't think about the fact that you're definitely going to lose. You just can't think about how many people she's killed. That's not the point. Just go out there and act like you're not certainly going to die. You're very helpful, Dross. Fuck. So, Orthos, as he's heading out, listen to me. The black dragons were the kings of this continent. In their day, their power dwarfed the Akura family. The gold dragons were just a servant family beneath them, scraping and clawing for every scrap. That is the spirit that flows through you. She's 2 realms above you? Good. You need at least that much of a handicap to make it a challenge. Orthos. I need to channel some Orthos energy in my life, I swear to God. I really do. He's like a fucking motivational speaker. Like, a motivational speaker that's like... who used to be like a fucking mobster or something. You know, just like... So, he heads out there. I love this moment. Dross, wow, you really set him on fire, didn't you? He didn't look very encouraged after I talked to him, but wow, you knew exactly the strings to pull. If I had hands, I'd be applauding you right now. Picture me applauding. Oh my God. Oh, God. I love this so much. So, Lindon goes out there. Seconds after he stepped out of the hall, the dragon's pair of servants walked out of the front door. Lindon tensed, tracing their movements, but each of the plain-looking men walked in different directions and took up a post near the edges of the closest stalks. As expected, they were there to prevent him from running. Though they felt like low golds, his spiritual perception had trouble reading them. It was like trying to hold a handful of mist. Very interested in that and what that means. So here she comes. And she unveils her spirit, and it is a bit intimidating. And they go at it. I won't go bit by bit throughout this entire fight. But she is, if it weren't for the empty palm, she would have won this fight. Straight up. He does manage to like catch some of her power with his like remnant arm and send it back at her. It's awesome. I am hopeful that he is going to continue to refine this and be able to do more. And I'm interested to see the ways that he can sort of amp this up potentially in the future. But right now, it's pretty much just grabbing a thing and throwing it back at a person. And I feel like he could do better. If he could, I don't know what that would look like, but it's not enough. It's a nice surprise. But she's aware he can do it by now, you know? Lindon he shoves her, she goes flying, he chases after her. And there is a lot of stuff, like, around them smoking, but nothing's lighting on fire, which is what he really needs for this shit to work, right? If he's gonna try the Void Dragon Dance, he needs real fire. So, they get the attention of the Silverfang Carps, and those begin to head towards them as they are fighting. Let's see. The fire aura from right, here it is. A great roar echoed over the sand as Ekeri's shelter collapsed. The blocks tumbled to the ground as though they were made out of real stone. A great puff of essence rose into the sky like dust. At last, flames licked up from the wreckage as bits of smashed wooden furniture caught fire. That was one of Lindon's worries eased. But she had been waiting too. The fire aura from around the flame gathered behind him, flames pulling themselves into a river. He sensed it happen, whirling to face the ruler technique she was conjuring behind his back. It was like staring down a dragon made of orange flame. He extended his own madra to the aura, contesting her control, but he felt like a child throwing his whole body weight against the arm of a warrior. The snake of fire washed over him, instantly igniting the edge of his clothes. If not for him using fire aura to push the fire away, and the water aura weakening the flames, his robes would have burned away entirely. So, at this point, he's trying to reach for some of that good water, and his hand isn't listening to him because it's trying too hard to get at Ekeri, and he's like, oh my god, not fucking now, because his other hand, I think, is like he's in the midst of doing something. He's fighting against the ruler technique. Let's see. But with his right hand, he fumbled at his pocket. The hand ignored him. Yep. So, long story short, this water helps for a second, but it doesn't do enough. And she catches him across the chest. He runs, tries to get away from her, and he looks like he might be able to manage it, but one of her attendants basically steps out and trips him, is essentially how that works. It's a low move, but there it is. So the carp arrive and mess the whole situation up. There's too many things, right? A burst of pain exploded next to his shoulder blade, and he screamed, hauling the fish with him as he twisted to see what had hit him. The servant stepped back, bloody knife in hand. Rage flowed from his black flame core. Still gripping the massive carp, Lindon extended his hand of flesh and fired his dragon's breath. The dragon girl ignored his technique. The bar of fire punched into the low gold side, instantly taking a chunk out of his ribs and igniting his clothes. Ooh. He doesn't die. Apparently there's probably something on him, a treasure, that might keep him alive, which I really wonder how many people have that. But then some carp show up, and they take care of him. So, last moment, I'm going to read the because, there's more to that fight. Let's see. He turned and faced Ekeri's whips. His left hand flowed with the power necessary to control the void dragon's dance, so he couldn't move it, but his remnant arm reached out and seized a nearby fish. He dragged it in front of him, using its body to shield him from her attack. She slices it in half. She pushes against the fire aura. He clenches his fist. He uses the void dragon. Everything gets burned except for her, because she's a fucking dragon, and it's just not that easy, right? And at this point, he is really weak, and she just comes at him, and there is very little that he can do to stop her. Lindon was past the scope of his plan. They had practiced for everything they could, but no fight could be fully anticipated. At some point, he had to lean on his experience and training. He only had enough Black Flame Madra for one more technique, so he let it go and took the hit. Her claws pierced his chest around his gold badge. They plunged through his skin, sending blood flowing down his stomach. The pain tore at his consciousness, but he hadn't accepted the hit by accident. If she wasn't this close, so close that he could smell the ash on her skin, he would never have been able to hit her himself. So he shoved his empty palm into her core. Her enforcer technique vanished, and her whip went dark, reverting to nothing more than a needle-pointed silver hilt. Gold eyes widened and her reptilian lips parted. Heat crept back into Lindon's eyes as he pulled Black Flame for one last time. The dragon's breath was only the width of 2 fingers, but it drilled straight through her heart. Severed, her necklaces fell to the ground, leaving loose pearls and chunks of jade and links of gold chain tumbling over the sand. Lindon shoved her away, stumbling backward, trying to conjure up enough Madra for a burning cloak. He should have gone for her head. Now he'd given her enough room to recover. She would be coming for him any second. She doesn't do that. She's scrambling in the sand for her jewelry. She grabs something and snaps it, and the air shatters. And he thinks that this is her using some sort of weapon to attack him. But instead, after having heard her talking about using this gate key, I think it's called, to get out, and how she would have to break it, I knew what was going on here. I figured that was what it was. And he reaches down and grabs the other necklaces, and he manages to get back to the safety of the tunnel. And she vanishes. And as we see later, it's because she's turning up at her sister's, where they're watching. And her sister is certain that they don't really need to even be here. They don't seem to think that this is a big deal. It's a plummy job, is the way I think one would say this. She gets to sit around and drink most of the day and occasionally pass her spirit over the portal to see if everything's okay, and it's always okay. So basically, she could just sit and read and drink and snack. Sounds pretty good to me. When he turns back up in the tunnel, Dross asks, "Who saved you?" And Lindon's like, I won. And he's so happy. And Orthos laughs and says, "By the time we get out of here, the Sky Sworn will be asking your permission to speak." So then we go to Sophoranatoth. I don't know if that's how you say it. I didn't hear the audiobook narrator, but yeah, that's her sister. And it's interesting when Ekeri materializes and dies, because I kind of thought maybe they'd be able to save her, but no. She looks at the wound and realizes that that's Black Flame that injured her sister and killed her. And it says, "Not even with their bloodline all but eradicated, and their authority forgotten, their descendants scattered, would the black dragons leave them alone." Saphara threw back her head, pouring all her rage and her hate into her voice. When she roared, it was the roar of a dragon, and all the golds roared with her. So I am super curious what's going to happen there, because I really love the idea that she thinks that this is a dragon, and Orthos is part dragon, he's the last descendant. So she's not totally wrong, but it was a person. And does that still count? I assume it doesn't matter. I'm sure it's the same. I just have a lot of questions. I can't wait. Yee. How many pages are there to this book entirely, actually, now that I hate the way this is on Kindle. Let's see, 305. And I just finished at 157. So that's about 3 more episodes if I underread, which I probably should from now on. So, yeah, I think that'll be okay, right? Yeah, that'll be good. Anyway, thank you again, Andy, for commissioning this episode. It's been so much fun covering this. I can't wait to talk about the next chapters on Friday. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.